Mr. Attorney General, I've been concerned in recent weeks by some steps that have been taken by the Biden administration, steps that I fear represent a significant amount of overreach. 7 weeks ago, you had President Biden giving a speech in which he promised to enlist the assistance of corporate America, all of corporate America, with more than 99 employees, in firing people who don't get vaccinated. Now, I'm vaccinated. I've encouraged everyone close to me to get vaccinated, but I don't think it's the role of the federal government to do that. He's threatening to cripple employers by imposing absolutely punishing fines on them, and they're now doing his dirty work, even before this act of overreach has been reduced to an order that could be litigated. Litigation that I believe would end the same way Youngstown Sheet and Tube versus Sawyer ended. And now, about a month after that, we had your October 4th memorandum in which you direct the Department of Justice and the FBI to intervene in what, as far as I can tell, is a state and local issue. That is a series of issues involving how parents advocate for their children with their local school boards. And I also believe that doing that through the Department of Justice, doing it in the way that you did it, directing the assistance, enlisting the help of all 94 U.S. attorneys, therefore every satellite office of the Department of Justice nationwide, you do it in a way that I think has a natural tendency to chill free speech in this area. I question seriously the role of the federal government in protecting people at local school board meetings from their neighbors. It is, after all, most of the time, state law, not federal, that's at play when there is criminal activity. Federal crimes are a subset of crimes generally. So you've referenced several times today that your letter covered only violence and threats of violence, and yet the very opening line of your memo says, in recent months, there's been a disturbing spike in harassment, intimidation, and threats of violence against school administrators, school board members, teachers, and staff who participate in the vital work of running our nation's public schools. You refer to this over and over again, and it's a pretty broad statement. I believe this has a tendency to chill free speech that is exercised at the state and local level, typically by neighbors, by parents to local school boards. In hindsight, would you agree that a natural consequence of your memo could be chilling free speech, protected speech by parents protesting local school board policies?
Senator, the memo is aimed only at violence and threats of violence. It states on its face that vigorous debate is protected. That is what this is about, and that is all this is about.
What about harassment and intimidation? Are those federal crimes?
They are federal crimes.
Are you referring to like witness tampering intimidation under 18 U.S.C. 1512, or what?
To 18 U.S.C. 2261A, which makes it a crime with intent to injure, harass, or intimidate, placing a person in reasonable fear of serious bodily injury through communications over the internet. Likewise, 47 U.S.C. 223A, making telephones calls with intention to harass. Now, I want to be clear, though, that those only are within, I take your point, those are only within what is permitted by the First Amendment. And the Supreme Court has been clear about that, too. In the Virginia versus Black case, the court explained when intimidation is not protected by the Constitution, and that is when it is made with the intent of placing the victim in fear of bodily harm or death. So that's what we're concerned about here.
Well, and one of the things that concerns me is, we've got 17 attorneys general, led by Attorney General Todd Rokita in Nevada, and joined by a total of 17 attorneys general, including Sean Reyes, the fantastic Attorney General of the state of Utah. And they've weighed in and they've said that there is not a barrage of accusations. There's no unusual flood of accusations of threats of violence against school board members. Nothing unusual, nothing that they can't handle at the state and local level. Normally, things like this against state and local officials involving state and local government entities like school boards are not federal. Now, in response to a series of questions before the House Judiciary Committee, including some questions asked by Congressman Jim Jordan from Ohio, you were asked your factual predicate for your October 4th memorandum and for your conclusions in this regard. You answered before that committee that your factual predicate for that was the October 22nd memorandum from the National School Board Association. The National School Board Association has been mentioned, has since withdrawn that memo, and yet you said that was the factual predicate. Given that that was the factual predicate and that it's rescinded its memo saying that there was no justification for some of the language that they used in that letter, will you rescind your memo?
Senator, best of my recollection, I said that the impetus for the letter, for my memorandum, was that letter and also reports of this kind of activity.
What reports?
I said again that at the time that they were news reports that had been published, and I think that some of the other senators here have described some of those news reports, and we've certainly seen subsequently more news reports and more statements by board members of threats to kill them.
Congressman Chip Roy of Texas raised in that same hearing the issue of a 14-year-old girl in a school bathroom being sexually assaulted in Loudoun County. And you indicated in response to that that you weren't aware of that. And in the 6 days before you testified before the House Judiciary Committee, have you become familiar with the publicly reported details of that case?
Yes, I have read about the case, yes.
If you were unfamiliar with the supposed instances of threats of violence and intimidation that the National School Board Association cited in the letter, then how did you determine that intervention by the FBI and the DOJ was necessary, that that was the right approach?
So the right approach in the letter is to meet with local law enforcement. That's what we've asked for, is to meet, to assess the situation, to see what their needs are, to strategize, and to open lines of communication. Now, I'm hopeful that many areas of local law enforcement will be well able to handle this on their own. But this is what the Justice Department does every day. We consult with our local and state partners and see whether assistance is necessary. And of course, we continue to have our own federal responsibilities with respect to communications by the internet, on social media, on telephone, through the mail. But I'm hopeful that we will not be needed in this area, that our state and local partners will be able to handle these threats.
My time's expired. I just want to state for the record as I close that my staff and I went through every news source raised by the National School Board Association. There was no explicit death threat. And I choose here to reiterate my concern that not every outburst or expression of concern by neighbors, among neighbors at a local school board meeting warrants a federal investigation. Certainly doesn't warrant the involvement of 94 U.S. attorneys in a way that threatens, intimidates, and tends inevitably to chill First Amendment activity. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator.